to the reading. Behold my servant, whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall show judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, and a smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment unto victory. And in his name shall the Gentiles trust. Just for a few moments, I want to talk about Jesus Christ, the only name you can trust. God bless you. You may be seated. Thank you, Urshus. God bless you. Won't be before you long. This text takes shape as a fulfillment of the prophet Isaiah. The way it begins is that Jesus and his disciples on the Sabbath day were hungry, and they walked through a field of corn. And they began to pluck some corn to eat. The Pharisees, who has always tried to find something wrong with Jesus, they saw him and his disciples feeding themselves on the Sabbath day. They began to make a big deal out of it, trying to prove that this Jesus is not as perfect as the people think he is. And they made a big deal out of it, and Jesus makes this statement to them. He says, which one of you on the Sabbath day, if you had your ox or your donkey to fall into a hole, which one of you would leave him there? Would you not pick him up? Because you must remember that the Pharisees were putting emphasis on there should be no work on the Sabbath day. That there should not be a muscle lifted concerning work. But what Jesus wanted them to know, that whenever there is a need for something, that need supersedes the day. And that no matter what day it is, because if you look at it from a biblical standpoint, this is the day that the Lord has made. And no matter what day it is, if anyone is in need, it is the opportunity for the believer to reflect the love of God. And so Jesus makes it clear to them that I know what you're getting at. You're trying to say that I'm violating the law. But can I tell you something? Sometimes grace suspends the rules. Too many of us are so rigid. We're so caught up in what is written down to the point that even ourselves are not able to keep it. But yet we try to get others to keep it. And so the Pharisees were trying to prove Jesus wrong. But then Jesus does something else. Later on, he goes into the temple. He goes into the temple and he sees a man with a withered hand. And Jesus looks at the Pharisees on the Sabbath day. And he says this question. He says, is it lawful to help somebody on the Sabbath day? And they were silent because they could never say they shouldn't help anybody, because that would have really revealed what kind of people they really were. And so the Bible says Jesus healed that man. Y'all ready for this? On the Sabbath day. It says, don't tell me that God has designed the day to be greater than the needs of human beings. So if anybody, anywhere needs anything, it's an opportunity for the Christian to reflect the love of God. Because some people will never come to church because they don't see the love of God flowing through the church folk. Y'all was expecting the Mother's Day sermon, I'm sorry. And so, with those two incidents, the picking of the corn and the healing of the man on the Sabbath, it would seem like the Pharisees would understand that both incidents fulfilled a Because if you keep reading down in the text, you'll see they begin to plot to kill him. And so when Jesus found this out, when Jesus let it be known to his disciples, because he already knew, he says to everybody, be quiet about me. Don't make a big deal about what I'm doing right now. And he said that to fulfill what the prophet Isaiah has spoke about. Well, God said, behold, my beloved servant, that he will not go around making a big deal out of who he was. Because you do know, the Bible says, although he was rich, come on, Bible readers, he became poor, spiritually speaking, to help us gain the righteousness of God. In other words, Jesus could have stayed where he was, but because of his love for you and I, well, I have a witness in here, that he came down to do what he's supposed to do. But look at this description of the Son of God. First of all, he is a servant. I think we need to take note of that. Because if Jesus was a servant, come on a little closer here. Who do you think we are not to be servants ourselves? Too many of us want to be served, but God didn't call us to be served. He called us to serve. And if God himself wrapped himself up in human flesh and made himself a servant, then so you and I must do the same thing. You know, we ought to look for opportunities to serve one another. Come on, talk to me, somebody. No, you ought to not wait on people to do you a favor. You ought to do a random act of kindness to somebody. He's a servant. And not only that, but watch this. He's God's servant. And you know what? It's one thing to be a servant. Because if you're a servant in your own strength, you're going to focus on your limitations. But when you're God's servant, say God's servant, you understand that you are empowered by God. And no matter what folks say or do, you still about serving him. Get a little closer here. You ain't going to let what somebody say stop you from serving the kingdom. That's good. He's God's servant. God's servant. And not only that, but I saw something else. God was well pleased with it. Because of who he was, that God was pleased with his life. But further on, he says, I put my spirit in him, and he will show judgment to the Gentiles. Because you got to understand the way this is set up. The Jews thought that they were the only somebody whom God shined on. The Jews, because they received the law through Moses first, because they was the recipient of the emancipation from Egyptian captivity, because they were the recipients of a land of promise where they didn't have to work for anything. That you read your Bible, didn't you? That before they went into the promised land, God said, before you get there, I'm going to move those inhabitants out, and you're going to move into all of the luxuries. They thought that God only dealt with them. But I know one thing about God. He so loved the world that no matter who you are or what you've done or where you've been, God's love is the same for you as for anybody else. I'm trying to tell somebody who don't gave up on themselves, quit giving up on yourself, because God so loved you. There's nothing that you can do to upset the love of God, to move God away from you. He so loved you. Watch his person. He's a person of humility. But watch this. I saw something else in these verses here. Look at 19th verse. He said he will not strive or cry. He's not going to make a big deal of who he is and what he's done. And he done a whole lot of miracles, but he didn't go around making a big deal out of it. And we must take the same cue as believers, is that when we do good, don't brag about it. You know, can I get y'all to tell me the truth for a few minutes here? That not everybody, but some of us, let me just say, some people have the knack of wanting everybody to know that you done done something good for somebody. I wish I had a witness in this. Listen. Don't nobody the other week I paid her light bill. You ain't got to tell nobody that. Because if you're doing it from your heart, God will reward you. But if you're walking around trying to get folk to see that you got something, you ain't going to get no reward for that. So next time you help somebody, let it be between you and them. Something else in this text I saw. Verse 20 says, a bruised reed shall he not break. Now, a reed is a plant that is normally on the shoreline of the ocean. And you will see that the water, the waves that keep coming in, they will continue to hit the reeds until they bend. And they bend to the point where some of them break. Well, what does a bruised reed represent in life? It represents people where life has beaten them. Come on, talk to me. Where life has dealt them some bitter blows. Jesus met a whole lot of bruised reeds in the scripture. The woman with the issue of blood, she was a bruised reed. The Bible says she spent everything. Am I talking to anybody in here? And instead of it getting better, it got worse. She was a bruised reed. Life had been the woman that was bent over for 18 years. She was a bruised reed. And she was just about to break. But I'm glad that God's servant knows how to deal with bruised reeds. Is there any bruised reeds in him where life has done something to you? Somebody has done something to you. A sickness may have done something to you. And you thought you was about to break. But then the Lord did something. Do I have anybody in that the doctor said that you on cancer, but the Lord said, I'm going to let it go so far? Bruce Lee, you don't want to tell the truth, but everybody in here, if you lived a little while, you've been a Bruce Lee. Life has bruised you in some form of fashion, and folk have stepped out on you in some form of fashion, and the best friends who you thought you had, they ain't there no more. But God, I tell you, he's in the business of straightening up that which was bent over. But watch this, not only a bruised reed, he won't break. But the next part, a smoking flax, a candle wick, that's the flame is just about to go out. There are some people that just about to give up, but then God. You know what I discovered? There are some folk who see you flickering out, and they'll try to finish the job. There's some candles, you just can't blow them one time. That God has equipped us, that just when the light about to go out, he do something to flicker us again. I'm trying to get somebody to shout with me this morning that the God we serve can take your mistakes and make you live again. He can take the failures. Everybody else want to blow you out. But God, but let that candle get real low. And I discovered something. That if you blow too hard on it, it'll fire up itself. Because God has a way. Bruce Lee, he won't break you. Look at somebody and say, God won't break you. Smoking flax, he won't quit you. His passion for you and I sets the record straight. That when the devil says you ain't no good, God's record says you was back then you wasn't no good. Come on, help me somebody right there. How many back then people we got? You used to be, but you ain't no more. You ought to celebrate that. Because there's a lot of folk want you to still be back there. But the God you serve say you ain't back there no more. I used to be, but I ain't no more. And Let me put my glasses on because I can't see like I used to. He says, his person is of humility. His purpose was to come to let us know that he's on our side. But he gives a promise right here. He says, in a bruised reed he won't break. And a smoking flax he shall not quench. Till he sends judgment unto victory. Now that word till has a lot of meaning to it. It means that there's something that ain't started yet. There's some unfinished business. You come on, help me. Until you do, when you hear until, that means something ain't happened that's going to happen. And I'm trying to tell somebody, when you think it ain't going to happen, you got an until in your life. I'm in trouble, but I'm going to wait until. I'm sick, but I'm going to wait until. Why? Because God got some unfinished business in your life. His promise is that if I start it, I'm going to begin a good work in it. His promise is that if I start it, other folk may leave you, but I won't forsake you. Right here in the text it says, he will continue until judgment is unto victory. In other words, judgment had to be taken care of. Hear me when I tell you this. From the homestead through Adam, when we sin, God's judgment began to roll. And the judgment says the wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is everlasting life. But before we get everlasting life, the judgment has to be satisfied. Well, Abraham couldn't satisfy. Isaac couldn't satisfy. Moses couldn't satisfy. We needed somebody to satisfy the judgment. And when you know, when you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. God wrapped himself up in human flesh. He healed the sick, but judgment still needs to be addressed. He raised the dead, but judgment still needs to be addressed. All the miracles that he did, but we still needed judgment to be addressed. And you know what he did? He allowed him. I said he allowed him. He allowed him to talk about it because he knew that nobody could satisfy the dead. So he decided to let men talk about it. You know the story, don't you? They found him in the garden on his bended knee. They arrested him like a common criminal. They marched him from hall to hall. They lied. They couldn't get their lies straight. And then somebody said, crucify him. But little did they know, the crucifying him was to settle the judgment for our sin. The Bible says they nailed him to the cross for the judgment. He died for the judgment. And when he died, God said, I'm satisfied. And you know when God is satisfied, blessings are on the way. The third day morning, he got up with all power in his nail-scarred hands. I'm trying to tell somebody, you can trust him because he loves you. You can trust him because he cares about you. You can trust him because he keeps his promise. How many of y'all know he's a promise keeper? Won't he do it? Won't he do it? Say yeah!
Now let the church say amen. Amen. Let's give God a hand clap of praise for that message. Praise God for the messenger. Praise God for the message. And the message is true. The message is true. That Jesus is the only name the only name that we can trust. And maybe you're here this morning. Maybe you're here this morning and you have put your trust in so many other things or people, and they have done what it was designed to do, let you down. Now, the invitation is extended that Jesus is standing waiting with arms wide open for you to come unto him. And there are witnesses in this building that though